It began with laughter, sharp, careless laughter, from the next room. I stood in the hallway, coat still damp from the rain, clutching the thick cream envelope the lawyer had handed me that morning. My fingers left wet marks on it. Inside were the final estate documents, confirmation that both of Michael's apartments were now legally mine. Michael, my brother. Gone 8 months, and yet I could still hear his laugh sometimes when I made coffee in the kitchen, that rasping, half-teasing sound he used when he was about to give advice I didn't want to hear. "You worry too much, Al," he'd say. "Life's shorter than you think." I'd promised him I'd look after the family. I thought that meant keeping them together. The hallway smelled faintly of lemon oil and thyme, remnants of the roast I'd been preparing before I went out to meet the lawyer. The air was heavy with the smell of wet fabric from my coat and the metallic tang of the rain that had followed me inside. I could hear them clearly now through the half-open dining room door. Ethan's voice, calm, managerial. "Once she signs them over, we'll sell both and split it. She's too sentimental to rent them out." There was a pause. The scrape of a fork against a plate. Then Grace's tone, syrupy, deliberate. "Grace, we'll make it seem like her idea. She hates conflict. Just tell her it's what Dad would have wanted." My stomach turned. The smell of thyme suddenly felt cloying, suffocating. I stood there, unable to move. The envelope's corner dug into my palm. Through the doorway I could see a sliver of the table, the edge of Ethan's watch glinting, Grace's manicured fingers tapping her phone. Their posture wasn't that of family gathered for dinner. It was a meeting. Lily's voice joined in, softer, hesitant but complicit. "She's had her turn. It's time we build our lives. Uncle Michael would have wanted that." Uncle Michael. The words stung. Their voices overlapped. Clean, polite, efficient. A strategy session disguised as conversation. I could picture them exchanging those small, satisfied glances people share when a plan starts to take shape. Not grief. Not gratitude. Just logistics. My breath came shallow. I pressed my back to the wall, staring at the framed photograph above the coat rack. A family picture from 2 summers ago at the lake. Michael in the center, sunburned and laughing. Ethan with his arm around me. Lily squinting in the sun. Grace pretending to fix her hair. I had believed in that moment, in the weight of connection. Now, that image mocked me. Another thing framed and frozen while reality shifted underneath. I looked down at the envelope again. The seal from Barnes & Holloway, LLP, estate attorneys, Glendale County. Beneath it, the weight of Michael's trust. His signature in dark blue ink, looping and firm. A tremor passed through me, small but definite. Something in me changed shape, not anger, not yet, something quieter. The stillness that comes before the sound breaks. I heard the rain again, the faint patter against the kitchen window. The kind of rain that softens everything. Voices, decisions, even heartbreak. I took a step back. Then another. My shoes left faint prints on the hardwood, leading away from their laughter. From the dining room came Ethan again, casual, confident. Ethan. "She'll agree once she realizes how much work maintaining those places is. We'll tell her we're helping her. She can't say no to that." Grace, a soft laugh. "Especially not coming from you. You're her favorite." The words hit harder than I expected. Favorite. I closed my eyes. My favorite boy, the one who used to hold my hand crossing the street, who called me Mommy until he was 10, who promised he'd never leave home without saying goodbye, and now, this. I turned toward the back door. My reflection in the glass looked pale, unfamiliar. My hair clung to my temples. The kitchen light behind me flickered slightly, a heartbeat of electricity in the silence. I opened the door. The hinges groaned softly, even they sounded tired. Outside, the drizzle had thickened into a fine mist. It settled over my shoulders, my hair, the envelope in my hand. The paper began to curl at the edges. I stepped out onto the back steps and exhaled slowly, watching my breath cloud in the cool air. The yard was slick, puddles gathering under the porch light. Inside, laughter again, lighter now, rising and falling like a song I couldn't bear to hear. I whispered, almost to the rain. "So that's how it is." The words didn't sound like mine. They sounded older, worn. I looked down at the envelope once more, then slipped it into the pocket of my coat. My fingers lingered there a moment, feeling the texture of the paper, the ridges of Michael's embossed initials. A gust of wind caught the door, and it swung halfway shut behind me. Through the gap, I caught one last glimpse. Grace pouring more wine, Ethan smiling, Lily scrolling on her phone. A perfect domestic frame. Then the door clicked closed. The sound of their laughter followed me like a draft of cold air, lingering in the back of my throat as I walked down the wet steps and into the quiet. My name is Diane Carter. I'm 62 years old, a retired English teacher from Glendale High. For 35 years, I taught teenagers how to find truth between the lines, irony, subtext, hidden meaning. I suppose that's what stings the most now. I missed it in my own home. Michael and I grew up with very little. Our father, Henry, was a mechanic who came home with oil on his hands and a quiet kind of exhaustion. Our mother, Louise, was a seamstress who sewed until her knuckles stiffened, her needle tapping against the table like a heartbeat. We learned early what dignity meant, not pride, but doing what you could, cleanly and without complaint. Michael was 2 years older. Always protective. When kids teased me for my hand-me-down shoes, he'd walk me home, one arm slung over my shoulder, and whisper, "Don't waste your heart on people who measure worth by polish." He meant it too. Even when he left school to start working at 19, he never lost that grounded decency. He started small, fixing up broken apartments around town. Paint, plumbing, paperwork. The kind of slow, unglamorous labor that doesn't make headlines but builds a life. By the time he was 60, he owned 4 properties and managed 2 more. He never married, said he didn't have the temperament for it. Too stubborn, he'd laugh, and too used to eating out of a can. When he said, "If I can't leave children, I'll leave family something solid," I thought it was a figure of speech. I didn't realize he meant it literally. I, on the other hand, built my life around the soft edges of people, students, husband, children. Robert and I married young at 26. He was a civil engineer, practical and steady. Together, we built something quiet but full. Sunday dinners, camping trips, the ritual of coffee and crosswords every morning before work. Then came the stroke. Sudden, ruthless. 8 years ago, April 14th, he was 57. I still remember the hospital hallway, the sterile brightness, the smell of disinfectant mixed with coffee from the vending machine. I remember the nurse touching my arm, her voice soft. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Carter." After that, Ethan and Lily became my entire orbit. Ethan, my eldest, always had his father's precision. Neat handwriting, organized folders, a hunger for control. He became a financial consultant, married Grace 5 years ago, and started living like the world owed him efficiency. His words, his clothes, even his affection, all measured. Lily was different, gentler, a nurse at Glendale Hospital. She was the one who stayed when Robert passed. She cooked me soup when I couldn't eat, sat on the edge of my bed and whispered, "Mom, you're still here. You have us." For a long time I believed that. Then Michael died. It was a Thursday in February. I'd just finished grading a former student's college recommendation draft when my phone rang. The number was from Glendale General. Heart failure, they said. Sudden. They'd found him in his apartment, his keys still in the door. The funeral was small. Quiet hymns, modest casket, overcast sky. A handful of tenants came. People who spoke about how Mr. Carter always fixed things himself and never raised the rent when times were hard. Ethan gave a short eulogy, composed and tidy. Lily cried through hers. I stood there clutching the folded flag from his Navy Reserve service, wishing I'd visited him more often. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived from Barnes & Holloway LLP, estate attorneys. Inside, a summons for estate review. When I met Richard Barnes, Michael's lawyer, he greeted me with that calm professionalism lawyers are trained to wear. Late 40s, crisp blue tie, faint smell of coffee and printer ink. He laid out the papers neatly across his mahogany desk. "Richard, your brother kept things simple, Mrs. Carter. He left 2 properties in your name. One in downtown Glendale, Maple Street Apartments, and another in Willow Creek Estates. Me. Both. In my name? Richard. Yes, ma'am. He specified you as sole beneficiary. I believe his exact words were, "Diane knows what's fair." The words caught in my throat. I blinked, trying to make sense of them. Me. How much are they worth? He flipped through the appraisal sheets. Richard. Combined, approximately $420,000. Both are tenant-occupied in good standing. Steady income potential if you choose to keep them. I remember the pen slipping from my fingers. I had never seen that kind of figure attached to my name. It wasn't wealth, not by the standards Ethan's clients lived by, but to me it meant security. Breath. Walking out of the office, rain had begun, thin, silvery drops that turned the sidewalks slick. I stopped by the bakery near the courthouse and bought 3 rolls, planning dinner. My mind was already weaving the moment I'd tell my children, the 3 of us at the dining table, steam rising from the roast, me saying softly, "Your uncle left us something. We'll decide together how to use it." Together, that was the key word. I'd even imagined their reactions. Ethan would straighten in his chair, thoughtful. Lily would reach for my hand. Maybe for once Grace would smile with something that wasn't calculation. Instead, I came home to laughter. That laughter, careless, unguarded, is something I can't unhear. The sound of people planning your erasure. Hours later, after the dishes sat untouched and the roast grew cold, I locked myself in my bedroom. The window was cracked open. The smell of rain drifted in. On the dresser lay the envelope, still damp at the corners. I hadn't even opened the second set of documents. The clock on the nightstand ticked past midnight. Each second felt too loud. I tried to remember the last time Ethan had hugged me without it feeling like an obligation. The last time Lily had asked for advice instead of approval. I replayed moments that had once felt warm. Ethan, 16, staying up late while I helped him with college essays. Lily, 9, brushing my hair after Robert's funeral, because she said I looked tired and beautiful. I thought I'd raised them to value integrity, to understand that character isn't something you inherit. It's something you practice. But tonight, their voices proved otherwise. Ethan's voice echoed in my head. Once she signs them over, we'll sell both and split it. Grace's whisper followed. She hates conflict. Just tell her it's what Dad would have wanted. The cruelty wasn't in the words themselves, but in how familiar they sounded. Calm, reasonable, like business. I sat down at the edge of the bed. The lamp cast a soft amber light over the photos on my wall. Robert at his drafting table, Michael holding a wrench and grinning, the kids in Halloween costumes. Fragments of lives built on effort and care. The refrigerator hummed faintly from the kitchen. A car passed outside, its tires whispering against wet pavement. The world was moving on, ordinary, while mine had just quietly collapsed. I pressed the envelope to my chest. The paper was cool against my skin, firm and real, proof of Michael's trust and of my children's betrayal. I whispered, almost a prayer. Michael, maybe this was your last lesson for me. The lesson, I realized, wasn't about money or property. It was about seeing clearly, finally, who deserved the things we built our lives around. And in that quiet, between the hum of the fridge and the sigh of the rain, I promised him I'll handle it the right way. The next morning I made breakfast as if nothing had happened. The kitchen light had that pale, early glow, the kind that makes everything look too honest. The rain had stopped, but the windows still held thin streaks of silver. I cracked eggs into the pan, the sizzle louder than usual, each pop of oil syncing with my heartbeat. Ethan walked in first, adjusting his tie, scrolling through his phone. Me. Sleep well? Ethan. Yeah, long day ahead. We should talk tonight about, the estate stuff. Me, smiling faintly. Yes, we should. He didn't notice the pause between my words. His tone was rehearsed, casual confidence with a pinch of authority. Grace followed, heels clicking softly on the tile. She poured herself coffee, thumb already moving across her phone screen. Grace. Morning. Diane. Me. Morning. She didn't look up. Lily joined last. Hair still damp from her shower, wearing her hospital badge. She kissed my cheek lightly, the gesture quick and guilty. Over the next few days, they became unusually attentive. Too attentive. Ethan started visiting in the evenings, bringing takeout. Grace began asking about my energy levels, my schedule. Lily called between shifts, checking if I'd eaten or rested. On the surface, it looked like care. Beneath it, coordination. One evening, Ethan leaned against the doorway while I folded laundry. Ethan. Mom, I've been thinking about those apartments. You know, rental management's tricky. Tenants, taxes, repairs. Me. Michael managed them for years. Ethan. Yeah, but he was younger. You shouldn't have to deal with all that stress now. I could help. Handle the paperwork. Maybe talk to some agents. He spoke as if my competence expired with age. Grace chimed in 2 days later during brunch. She'd brought croissants from that overpriced bakery she liked, a peace offering dressed as generosity. Grace, you're not getting younger, Diane. Managing properties is exhausting. Maybe liquidating would be better long-term. Me. Liquidating? Ethan. She means selling, Mom. You could invest the money safely. We could set you up with a diversified portfolio. Low risk, steady returns. Their words were polite. Their tone was possession. That night, I sat by the living room window, rereading Michael's letter. His handwriting was neat, deliberate, the same way he used to sign receipts when he fixed cars in our father's shop. These properties are yours, Diane. Do with them what you feel is right. But don't let anyone decide for you. You always had the better judgment. I could almost hear his voice. Calm, amused, knowing. He must have seen this coming. The subtle shifts that money invites. I folded the letter back into its envelope and tucked it inside my nightstand. The following weekend, Ethan invited me for dinner at his house. Just family, he'd said. I knew what it meant. A performance. Grace greeted me at the door wearing pearls. The dining table was staged. Candles, cloth napkins, wine glasses filled to the same height. Lily was already there, her posture careful, eyes darting between them and me. We ate in near-perfect politeness. The conversation stayed light. Work, weather, a new patient Lily couldn't talk about in detail. Then, as dessert was served, Grace's chocolate mousse, whipped within an inch of its life, Ethan cleared his throat. Ethan. So, Mum, have you thought more about the apartments? Me. Every day. Grace reached over and squeezed my hand. Her nails were immaculate, cold against my skin. Grace, softly. You could help us buy our first house. We'd pay you back, of course. Me. How much did you have in mind? Ethan. Well, the downtown unit's worth around $180. We could handle half up front, maybe through the equity line. The rest within a year. He spoke in numbers like a man at a board meeting. I glanced at Lily, who hesitated before speaking. Lily. And I could take the Willow Creek one. It's close to the hospital, and I could manage the tenants myself if I needed to. Their eyes met for a moment. Silent coordination. A pact rehearsed in whispers. Me. Let me think on it. Ethan leaned back, satisfied. Grace smiled like she'd closed a deal. I smiled too. The kind of smile I'd worn for years at parent-teacher conferences when I already knew the truth about someone's child. When I left, I didn't take the leftovers Grace had packed. I walked out into the cool night, the air heavy with lavender from her garden, and felt something settling inside me. Not bitterness, not yet, just a quiet, deliberate focus. In the following days, I let them believe I was swaying. I played the role they wrote for me. Ethan began bringing me spreadsheets. Grace sent listings of potential buyers. Lily texted pictures of Willow Creek sunsets, subtle persuasion in pixels. But while they plotted, I began to prepare. First, I visited the apartments myself, downtown Glendale, the Maple Street unit. It smelled of lemon cleaner and coffee. The tenants, a middle-aged couple, greeted me kindly. The husband said, "Mr. Carter was the best landlord we ever had. Never raised rent once." When I told them I'd be continuing the lease as is, they smiled with relief. Then Willow Creek. Modern building, white siding, quiet courtyard. The tenant there, a nurse named Sophia, reminded me of Lily. Same tired eyes, same patience in her tone. "I'm so sorry about Mr. Carter," she said. He always stopped by with donuts. I stood in that apartment, sunlight pooling over the balcony, and made my choice. Michael's letter had ended with one more line I hadn't noticed before. Faint. Written in pencil on the back of the final page. Trust what silence tells you. 2 nights later, Ethan came by again. Grace didn't join. She was busy with errands, which meant she was testing whether I'd bring it up myself. Ethan placed a manila folder on the coffee table. Ethan. Some numbers I ran. The market's peaking right now. If we list both, you could clear 420, maybe more. No rush, but it's good to be ready. Me. You've been busy. Ethan. Just helping. Me. You always were good with numbers. He smiled. Not hearing the undercurrent, Ethan. Dad would have done the same. Mom, he'd want you to rest. Me. And you? What do you want? He hesitated, the question landing harder than he expected. Ethan. I just want what's best for the family. The word family used like a transaction. I reached for his folder, opened it, scanned the printed sheets. His projections were neat, precise, convincing, and every note ended with some version of recommended by Ethan Carter Consulting. I'll see. He was already lining up his share. I closed the folder. Me. I'll think about it. He stood, kissed the top of my head, and left. His cologne lingered in the air long after the door clicked shut. Clean, expensive, and empty. The next morning, I called Richard Barnes. Me. Richard, it's Diane Carter. Richard. Of course. Everything all right? Me. Yes. I just need to discuss something regarding the title documents. Richard. You still have them? Me. Every page. He exhaled softly, the sound of someone who already understood. Richard. What do you need, Diane? Me. I need to make sure no transfer or sale can happen without my explicit, notarized consent, even from family. Richard. Understood. I can draw up a restriction clause and register it within 48 hours. Me. Do it. He paused. Richard, may I ask, is this about your son? Me. It's about keeping my brother's lesson intact. By Saturday, the paperwork was sealed, filed, and recorded. I didn't tell them. Not yet. That evening, Ethan called. Ethan. Mom, Grace and I talked. We might tour some listings this week. Maybe you could come along, get a feel for what your investment would help with. Me. Sure. Just send me the addresses. When he hung up, I sat in the quiet house, light pooling through the curtains, the tick of the clock marking each second with surgical precision. I realized I no longer felt powerless. The silence was no longer hollow. It was strategy. For the first time in months, I slept soundly. Sunday dinner. My turn to host. The table was set with care, the same way my mother used to do. White cloth, candles, roast chicken, the smell of rosemary filling the air. Ethan and Grace arrived early. Lily not long after. We ate, talked, pretended. Then, as dishes clinked and the room quieted, I spoke softly. Me. I visited the apartments. Ethan froze mid-sip. Grace's fork paused mid-air. Lily looked relieved, thinking maybe this was progress. Me. They're well cared for. Good tenants. Michael did good work. Ethan. That's great, Mom, so what do you think? About next steps? Me. I think you're right. They exchanged a quick look. Triumph flickering like light off glass. Grace. Oh, that's wonderful, Diane. We'll help with everything. Me. Yes, you'll help. I smiled. Cutting into my roast, because they didn't know. The papers were already protected. The deeds could no longer move an inch without my hand guiding them. And yet, I let them dream a little longer. There was something quietly satisfying in that, in letting deceit ripen just enough before the harvest. I looked at my children across the table. Grown. Ambitious, polished, and thought of Michael's final words. You always had the better judgment. He'd been right. The following Monday, I sat once again across from Richard Barnes in his office, a narrow room lined with dark shelves and the smell of paper, coffee, and faint lemon polish. The blinds were half drawn, slicing the sunlight into patient stripes across the desk. Richard adjusted his glasses, his expression professional, but warm. He had the kind of presence that made silence comfortable, the rare trait of a man who listens more than he speaks. Me. Richard. I'd like to update the ownership terms on the apartments. Richard. Of course. You wish to transfer them to your children? Me. Not quite. I told him everything. From the moment I'd come home from his office with Michael's envelope, to the laughter I'd overheard in the next room. Ethan's calm plotting. Grace's careful coaching. Lily's reluctant compliance. How their kindness afterward had been too timed, too deliberate. How I'd smiled through every conversation, every visit, every mention of helping me manage things. As I spoke, Richard's brows drew together. He didn't interrupt, just leaned back slightly, pen resting motionless between his fingers. When I finished, the room felt heavy with the quiet I'd carried for days. Richard. Mrs. Carter. That's quite a breach of trust. Me. Yes, family, it seems, can be creative with definitions. He gave a short, humorless chuckle. Then he opened a new folder and began writing. Richard. There's another way to protect your assets without cutting them off completely. We could create a living trust. You'd remain the primary owner while alive with full rights to rent, renovate, or even sell. But upon your passing, the properties could convert into a charitable trust, funds directed toward causes you approve. Me? So they wouldn't inherit directly? Richard. Not unless you specify it. You could dedicate it to scholarships, housing support, anything aligned with your values. It would be irreversible once signed. The idea settled over me like a calm tide. A trust, conditional, deliberate, untouchable. Me. Perfect. Let's do that, he nodded. I'll draft it immediately. What would you like it called? I thought for a moment, tracing my finger along the grain of the oak desk. Through the glass pane, I could hear faint city noise, car horns, footsteps, someone's laughter on the sidewalk. Life, going on. Then I said softly, Me. The Michael Grant Foundation. For honest beginnings, Richard's pen paused mid-stroke. He smiled faintly. Richard, that sounds fitting. 3 days later, a courier delivered a slim, heavy envelope to my doorstep. Inside were the notarized trust documents, crisp pages embossed with the state seal, signed by both Richard and me. I read every line twice. The Michael Grant Foundation, Trust Code 4837B, established under the laws of Glendale County for the purpose of community education and housing assistance. It was all there. My name as primary trustee, complete control during my lifetime, automatic conversion to a charitable foundation after my passing. Ethan and Lily were listed only as honorary advisors with no financial rights. Stamped, sealed, legally binding. I placed the papers in the same drawer as Michael's letter and exhaled. Not relief exactly, but alignment. For the first time since his death, I felt like I'd done something he would have approved of. The next evening, I was reading by the window when Ethan showed up unannounced. He didn't knock. He'd kept his own key since college. He looked slightly irritated, slightly rehearsed. The way people do when they've practiced sounding casual. Ethan, you're avoiding me. Me, am I? Ethan, feels like it. You've been distant. What's going on? Me, just taking care of paperwork. Ethan, about the apartments? Me, about the future. He frowned, confusion flickering across his features like static. For a second I saw the boy he used to be, uncertain, searching. Then it vanished behind that polished corporate composure. Ethan, if you're overwhelmed, Mom, I can handle it. You don't have to do everything yourself. Me, I know. That's what worries me. He blinked, unsure how to respond. I smiled, soft enough to disarm him. Me, I'll call you when there's something to discuss. He hesitated, then nodded slowly. All right. He kissed my cheek, brief and distracted. His cologne lingered even after he'd gone. Synthetic cedar and ambition. When the door clicked shut, I locked it quietly and leaned my forehead against the wood. My pulse was steady, my breathing even. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't pretending. 2 days later, Grace called. Her tone was honeyed concern. Grace. Diane, I thought we could have brunch. Just us girls. Get out of the house a bit. I said yes. We met at a cafe downtown. Pale wood tables, overpriced orange juice, the faint hum of jazz from hidden speakers. Grace arrived in a cream blazer, sunglasses perched on her head, a vision of controlled charm. She ordered mimosas before I'd even sat down. Grace. You look lovely. Retirement's treating you well. Me. It has its quiet moments. Grace. Well, enjoy them while you can. Families can get complicated once property's involved. Her voice dropped slightly on that last word. A deliberate seed planted with a smile. Me. Yes, they can. She leaned forward. Elbows on the table, diamond bracelet catching the light. Grace. We just want to make sure everything's fair, you know. Ethan worries you're overworking yourself. And Lily, well, she means well, but she's too emotional about these things. I stirred my coffee slowly, watching the cream spiral. Me. Fairness is important. Grace. Exactly. It's all about being practical. The sooner things are settled, the easier it is for everyone. Me. You sound like someone rehearsing a presentation. She blinked, then laughed, a quick, performative sound. Grace. Oh, Diane, you make it sound so dramatic. I just mean, it's good to have clarity. No surprises. I lifted my cup, the porcelain warm in my hands. Me. I agree. No surprises. Her smile faltered slightly, uncertain whether I meant agreement or warning. When the check arrived, she reached for it. Grace. My treat. Me. No, let me. It's good practice. Managing my own affairs. For a moment, something cold flashed in her eyes. Then she shrugged lightly. Grace. Suit yourself. That night, I returned home to an empty house. The quiet felt clean now. Not hollow. Just mine. I made tea and sat at the kitchen table, rereading the trust papers one last time. The lawyer's notary seal glinted under the lamplight. Every signature, every clause, every safeguard. The architecture of self-respect, built in ink. I thought of Michael again, of his hands blackened with grease. His laugh echoing through our father's old workshop. If I can't leave children, I'll leave family something solid. He had. But solid didn't mean money. It meant lesson. A faint tap came at the window, branches brushing in the night wind. I whispered to no one in particular. It's done, Michael. Outside, the moonlight spilled silver over the lawn, calm and steady. Inside, I felt the kind of peace that comes only after choosing silence over confrontation. The quiet victory of doing right, unseen. The next time Ethan, Grace, or Lily brought up the apartments, I would nod, listen, maybe even smile because the truth was already written. The Michael Grant Foundation now lived between signatures and law, untouchable, incorruptible, waiting patiently for its day. And when that day came, the lesson would reveal itself, not in anger, but in clarity. 2 Sundays later, I called everyone to my house. The invitation had been short, handwritten on cream stationery, family dinner. 6 p.m., please be on time. No explanations, no subject line. By late afternoon, the house smelled of rosemary chicken and baked apples. I'd polished the dining table, the same one Robert and I had bought second-hand 30 years ago, its surface still bearing faint scratches from Lily's childhood homework pencils. Sunlight spilled through the curtains in long, soft ribbons, touching everything like quiet blessing. The envelope, the very same one from that first night, sat in the center of the table. Its edges were worn now, corners soft from being opened and closed too many times. At precisely 6, the doorbell rang. Ethan came in first, punctual as always, his shirt crisp, his jaw tense. Grace followed, dressed like she was attending a networking brunch instead of a family dinner. Pearls, perfume, that faint smile she wore like armor. Lily trailed behind them, subdued, her eyes flickering between us like she was bracing for an invisible storm. And then came Mr. Carter, not family by blood, but my brother's oldest friend and the executor of Michael's estate. A quiet man with silver hair, a limp from an old factory injury, and a voice that carried both gentleness and authority. He greeted everyone politely, then took the seat at the far end, opposite me. When everyone had settled, I poured water into the glasses, one by one. The faint clink echoed in the silence. Me. I wanted to thank you all for your interest in Uncle Michael's apartments. I smiled, gently, letting the pause stretch. Me. I've made some decisions. Ethan leaned forward, almost relieved. Ethan. Finally, Grace added quickly with a bright, brittle tone. Grace. That's wonderful news, Diane. I nodded, reaching for the envelope. The sound of the paper sliding free was sharper than I expected, a clean tear in the still air. Me. The downtown apartment will remain rented to the same tenants. The Willow Creek one as well, Ethan blinked. Wait, what? I continued, calm, deliberate. Me. I've established something called the Michael Grant Foundation. Upon my passing, both properties will fund scholarships for nursing students and small business grants. The silence that followed was not peaceful. It was dense, like the air before thunder. Grace was the first to break it. Grace, you're donating them? Ethan straightened in his chair, color rising in his neck. Ethan, wait, you can't just… Me, I can. And I have. I reached into the envelope again and slid 2 crisp documents across the table, notarized copies of the trust. The embossed state seal caught the light. Ethan stared at them like they were written in another language. Ethan. Mom, you don't understand what you're doing. Me. On the contrary, I said softly. I've never understood anything more clearly. The clock ticked once, a deep, deliberate sound. Ethan's voice sharpened, all polish stripped away. Ethan, after everything we've done for you? Mr. Carter shifted slightly in his chair, eyes flicking toward Ethan. But I held up a hand. I wanted the truth to finish its course. Me. What you plan to do? Ethan, was sell my brother's memory for convenience. My voice trembled once. Just once before I steadied it. Me. I heard every word that night. The effect was immediate. Grace went pale, her hand tightening around her napkin. Lily's eyes filled instantly, tears she didn't yet allow to fall. Ethan froze, disbelief etched across his face. Ethan. You… what? Me. The night I came home from the lawyer's office. You, Grace, and Lily. I stood in the hallway listening. Every word. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Grace swallowed. Her voice was quiet but sharp. Grace, that's… You misunderstood. We were just… Me. Planning, I finished for her. Yes, I heard the plan. Ethan exhaled, a sound half between frustration and panic. Ethan, this is ridiculous. You're twisting everything. We were trying to help you. Me. No, I said, my voice like a whisper cutting glass. You were trying to help yourselves. His hand hit the table, palm flat, sudden. The plates rattled. Ethan, don't talk to me like I'm some stranger. We're your children. Me. Then you should have remembered what that meant. The air felt electric, the room pulsing with the heat of truth that had been waiting too long. Me, quietly. Family isn't a transaction. Ethan's mouth opened, then closed. Grace looked away. Lily finally spoke, her voice breaking. Lily, Mom, please. I didn't say anything because I didn't know what to do. They were talking so fast and I… Me. You stayed silent. Lily. I'm sorry. Me. Silence is its own choice. She nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks now, unchecked. Mr. Carter cleared his throat gently. Mr. Carter. Mrs. Carter's arrangement is legally binding. The trust is active and irrevocable. His tone was even, but his eyes met mine briefly. Steady, proud. Ethan's jaw tightened. He turned toward him. Ethan, you knew? Mr. Carter, I did, and I approved the paperwork as executor. Ethan, you helped her betray her own family? Mr. Carter, I helped her honor her brothers. That silenced him. The clock ticked again. Outside, a bird called faintly, absurdly gentle against the tension inside. I folded my hands on the table. Me, you wanted the apartments? Earn them by living with integrity. Until then, they belong to the purpose your uncle believed in, helping those who still remember decency. For a long moment, no one spoke. Ethan's face shifted, disbelief to anger, to something rawer, smaller. He pushed his chair back so hard it screeched against the floor. Ethan, you'll regret this. Me, perhaps. But at least I'll regret it honestly. He stood, knocking over the chair. Grace rose with him, her face flushed, her lips trembling with words she didn't dare say. Together they turned and left, the door slamming behind them like a final punctuation mark. The house fell into a deep, echoing quiet. Lily stayed seated. The sound of her soft crying filled the space their anger had left behind. She finally whispered, "Lily, Mom, I didn't mean to hurt you. I just wanted to belong." I reached across the table and took her hand. Her fingers were cold. "Me, I know, sweetheart. But belonging isn't worth your conscience. Lily, I wish I'd said something that night." "Me, then start saying something now." She nodded slowly, pressing the back of my hand to her cheek. For the first time in years, I saw her not as my little girl, but as a woman standing at the edge of her own choice. Mr. Carter cleared his throat softly again. "Respectful, Mr. Carter. Diane, if you'd like, I can keep the originals of the trust documents in my office for safekeeping." "Me, yes, please. Thank you." He gathered the papers, sliding them into a leather folder. As he did, the late sunlight caught the embossed title, the Michael Grant Foundation. He looked at me with a faint, knowing smile. "Mr. Carter, your brother would have been proud." "Me. He always believed in lessons with consequences." He nodded, standing with effort. Then tonight, he got both. After he left, I walked him to the door. The evening air was cool, carrying the scent of wet leaves and the distant hum of traffic. When I turned back, Lily was still at the table, dabbing her eyes with a napkin. "Me, you can stay if you'd like." "Lily, no. I think I should go talk to them. Try to calm Ethan down. Me, you can try. But remember, calm isn't the same as right." She nodded, hesitated at the doorway, then came back and hugged me tight. Her voice was muffled against my shoulder. "Lily, you're stronger than I realized." Me, no, just finish being quiet. When she left, I stood alone in the dining room. The chairs were uneven now, one fallen, one empty. The candle flames flickered weakly in the draft. I walked around the table, picked up Ethan's chair, and set it upright. Then I gathered the plates, washed them slowly in the sink, feeling the rhythm of running water calm my hands. Outside, the sky deepened into indigo. The house was silent again. But this time, the silence was mine, earned, deliberate, and whole. I dried my hands, turned off the lights, and glanced once more at the table. The envelope still lay there, faintly curled, empty now except for air and the echo of everything that had been said. I placed it back in the drawer beside Michael's letter, his final words echoing in my head like a benediction. "You always had the better judgment." Yes, I thought. Finally I used it. In the following weeks, the house settled into a kind of silence that felt earned. Not the cold, echoing quiet of grief, but something steadier. Like the air after a storm. Ethan called only once. I was watering the small geraniums by the window when the phone rang. His name flashed on the screen, familiar letters that now carried weight instead of warmth. I answered, mostly out of habit. "Ethan, you had no right." His voice was low, clipped. Controlled anger. "Me? To what?" "Ethan, to humiliate me like that. In front of Grace. In front of a lawyer. Me. I didn't humiliate you." "Ethan, you did that yourself." There was a pause, long enough for the sound of traffic to fill the silence between us. "Ethan, you think this makes you noble? You just threw away your family's future." "Me. No," I said quietly. "I gave it one." He hung up. The click was clean. Final. That was the last I heard his voice. Grace, true to form, followed up the next morning with a long text, paragraphs about forgiveness, family unity, and moving forward together. I didn't reply. I didn't even open it fully. The preview on my screen told me everything I needed to know, that some people mistake control for love. I archived the message and went back to my tea. Lily, though, began to come around again. Tentatively at first. She'd show up with grocery bags or soup from the hospital cafeteria, setting them on the counter like peace offerings. Lily, you're eating enough, right? Me, I'm trying to. Lily, you always say that when you're not. We both smiled, and the stiffness between us eased a little. The first time she stayed past dinner, we ended up talking until midnight, about her patients, about Michael, about how she'd found his old wrench set in my garage. Lily, I cleaned them up. Maybe we could display them at the fundraiser, like a tribute. Me, that's a lovely idea. She nodded, eyes shining. He believed in fixing things, she said softly. 2 weeks later, the first Michael Grant Scholarship fundraiser took place. It was held at the Willow Creek apartment courtyard, the same place Lily had wanted for herself. When I arrived that evening, the sun was setting behind the buildings, painting the windows gold. String lights hung from the trees, casting a warm, honeyed glow over the crowd. Nursing students stood in small clusters, laughing, holding paper cups of cider. Someone had set up a small stage, and on it was a framed photograph of Michael, smiling, hands on his hips, his mechanic's jacket dusted with years of honest work. Lily came up beside me, clipboard in hand, a volunteer badge pinned to her sweater. She looked proud, nervous, alive. Lily, you made this possible. Me. No, I said, smiling. Your uncle did. I just kept the promise. The music started, soft acoustic guitar, something gentle that didn't demand attention but filled the air with warmth. I watched as a group of students passed around donation envelopes, chatting about their future rotations, their dreams. For a moment, I imagined Michael standing there among them, his laugh rumbling, his eyes crinkled in approval. A week after the fundraiser, I received a letter from Richard Barnes. His stationery was the same as always, off-white, embossed with the firm's name. Inside a single page, "Foundation registered successfully. Your brother would be proud." I read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it beside Michael's letter in my nightstand drawer. The two envelopes sat side by side, one a farewell, the other a beginning. Spring came early that year. The days stretched longer, softer. I found myself waking before sunrise, opening the curtains to let the pale light in. The geraniums on the sill bloomed brighter than they had in years. Some evenings, I'd walk through the backyard barefoot, feeling the cool grass under my feet, the soil still damp from morning rain. It's strange how peace doesn't arrive with fanfare. It just settles quietly, like dust after a long argument. The phone would ring sometimes. Neighbors, old colleagues, even a few of Michael's former tenants, thanking me for keeping the buildings as they were. I'd listen, grateful, and then return to the simple rhythm of my days. No schemes, no negotiations, just clean air and the sound of my own breathing. One Sunday afternoon, Lily brought over a box of photographs. Lily, I thought we could start sorting for the foundation website. Uncle Michael deserves more than a plaque. We sat on the floor. Photos spread around us. Michael fixing a door, Michael holding a puppy. Michael at a picnic grinning with a hot dog in one hand and a wrench in the other. Me, he hated being photographed. Lily, which makes these even better. At one point, she held up a picture of the two of us, taken when I was 12 and he was 14. We were standing in front of our father's garage, grease smeared on our faces, both laughing at something off camera. Lily, you look like you're about to scold him. Me, I probably was. He'd just dropped my lunchbox in the oil pan. We both laughed, and the sound felt easy again, unforced, real. Later that night, after Lily left, I sat by the window with a cup of chamomile tea. Outside, the world was quiet, the kind of quiet that hums instead of hollows. The moonlight fell across the dining table, glinting off the faint ring left by Ethan's overturned glass from that night. I hadn't scrubbed it away. It reminded me that peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the space you earn after standing through it. I thought of my children, of Ethan's anger, Grace's silence, Lily's slow return. I hoped time would soften them, maybe even humble them, but whether it did or not, I was done bending myself to be understood. Michael's lesson had taken root, strong, steady, incorruptible. I sipped my tea, feeling its warmth spread through me. The house, my house, was finally still. No one trying to persuade, to plan, to take. No noise, no pretense, just quiet. And for the first time in years, it belonged entirely to me.